Hi guys, hope you're all well. This is Ulas. Today we'll be starting the physiology of central nervous system and we'll be beginning with the first chapter, that is the physiological anatomy of the spinal cord. Okay guys, let's start. Guys, I have a diagram here. Can you tell me what this is? Okay, this pretty much looks like a person. Huh? Imagine it's a person. Okay, this is a person and there is a brain here and there is the peripheral nerves here, but there is something missing in it. What is it? Yes, you're right, that is the spinal cord. See here, this is the spinal cord. Spinal cord is the it's basically a bundle of nerve fibers, nerve tracts, fibers, fasciculi, you can call that. So they are all together and forming like a cord. Cord, by definition, it is a thin flexible band which is formed by the many other fibers put together. So spinal cord is also like that. Many axons, cell bodies are there, but many axons come together and form the spinal cord. So that was the basically what is spinal cord. Now let's study the extent of the spinal cord. From where to where is it called spinal cord? See, you know that spinal cord is a part of the central nervous system, but where does it start exactly? See, there is brain, there is base of brain, and there is a medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata ends at the lower border of C1, this first cervical vertebra. So from first cervical vertebra till the lower, means basically the upper border, it ends, the medulla oblongata. So from the upper border of C1 to the lower border of L1, that is the spinal cord. It's approximately 40 centimeter in length. And that was the extent of the spinal cord. So how thick it would be? It would be very thick, thin, like almost this much in a normal person. So, and is cylindrical in shape, isn't it? That cylindrical in shape is objected at 2 points, 2 regions basically. That is, do you know what are spinal segments? See, in a spinal cord, it's not exactly correlating with the vertebra, but from the spinal cord there are spinal nerves arising. So keeping that as a reference, the spinal cord is divided into these segments, that is the 8 cervical segments, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, sacral and 1 coccygeal segment. So from the 4th cervical segment to the 1st thoracic segment, there is an enlargement. Why is there an enlargement? Because many nerves are going away from it. So why are those many nerves coming? Because from C5 to T1 region there are the upper limbs. So upper limbs have a lot of innervation. What is that specifically called? The innervation to the upper limb? That is called the brachial plexus, isn't it? It's coming from C5 to T1 basically. So from C4 to T1 there is an enlargement. They call it a cervical enlargement. Similarly, if you go a little down, there are a lot of nerves coming to innervate the lower limbs. So if there are many nerves coming there will also be an enlargement. That is from L1 to S3. So you clear now? Extent, upper end, enlargements. Now let's go to the lower end of the spinal cord. So the lower end of the spinal cord, where does this lower end ends? The spinal cord end, it ends at the lower border of L1, isn't it? Here the spinal cord comes and it forms like a cone-like shape. So that is called conus medullaris. Conus medullaris. And there is something beautiful attaching here. That is the phylum terminale. It's a band of connective tissue which connects the spinal cord to the coccyx. Okay, that is the phylum terminale. So how is it useful? See, spinal cord is floating in the central, this cerebrospinal fluid. So it can go back, it can hurry it. Something should be there to keep it in shape. If you do Shirshasana, it will go back to the brain. No, it won't. So that fibrous tissue is holding the spinal cord in position. Spinal cord, coccyx, it's holding in position. And see, lower limbs are much below the level of L1. So the nerves to the lower limbs are going like this, isn't it? So to the anatomists of that time, it looked like the tail of a horse. See, this is looked like a tail of a horse. So they called it cauda equina. Cauda is the tail, equina is a horse. So tail of a horse. It looked like a tail of a horse. That was the basically what the spinal cord looks like in gross. Now let's go to the transverse section of the spinal cord. Guys, see here. spinal cord is like a sushi. Just imagine there is a base. On that the base is basically the meninges. Over that there is white matter. Over that there is gray matter. They rolled it and cut off. That is the transverse section basically. Not exactly that. It's similar to that. Okay. There is meninges, white matter and gray matter. Okay. See. This is the dura matter. This is the arachnoid matter, and this is the pia matter. The pink line is the pia matter. And guys, this is the white matter. The one in white is the white matter, and this is the gray matter. Okay, this is the central canal. Central canal is basically a hole in the spinal cord. It is continuous with the ventricles of the brain, from which the cerebrospinal fluid flows in it. And see here, similarly, these are also the meninges: dura matter, arachnoid matter, and pia matter. Pia matter is closely associated with the spinal cord itself. It is similar to what happens in the brain. Brain also, there is pia matter attached to the brain. Okay. This is the dorsal root ganglion. This is something interesting we'll learn now. There's something basic which happens in the spinal cord. That is, the sensory inputs come from the dorsal side, and the motor inputs go from the ventral side. See here, this is the anterior, this is the posterior. So the sensory inputs are coming like this. See, like it's imagine this is a sensory stimulus. The sensory input comes like this and goes to the spinal cord. So why is there a swelling there? There are no nerves going out now, but there is a swelling because it's not that the same nerve goes till the brain. It is that there is a nerve coming here. It gives the signal to one more nerve which goes to the other side. Then again there is one more nerve which goes to the brain. We'll study that in detail soon. So this nerve, I'll just erase it. This nerve is coming like this. So the cell body of this nerve is hosted in the dorsal root ganglion. So like this, there are many sensory nerves. So dorsal root ganglion hosts the cell bodies. Dorsal root ganglion hosts the cell bodies of the sensory nerves. Why is there something similar in the ventral root ganglion? Ventral root means like in the motor nerves also they need a cell body, right? So do they have a ganglion? Not exactly, because the motor nerves, they begin in the gray matter of the spinal cord itself, in the ventral horn. Most of them begin in the ventral horn. So the cell bodies are there in the ventral horn. So there is no ventral root ganglion as such. You got it now? The cell bodies are in the of the sensory are in the dorsal root ganglion, and the cell bodies of the motor nerves are in the ventral root of the spinal cord, ventral horn of the spinal cord basically. So the dorsal root ganglion is outside the gray matter of the spinal cord, and the nuclei of the means the cell bodies of the motor nerves are in the ventral root. Clear about it? We'll be studying these in detail as we progress in the ascending and descending tracks. Okay. See, that was the basically what the spinal cord looks like. Now let's get to the specific gray matter and white matter. See here, guys, this is the representation of a gray spinal cord, basically transverse section. See, you could see this butterfly shape now. This is somewhat like a butterfly, isn't it? Or the head shape. Many physiologists call it, anatomists also call it the head shape of the spinal cord. So it has a dorsal horn, lateral horn, and a ventral horn. So they are basically extensions of the gray matter which look like horns. Okay, now let's study what are present in the gray, like the horns. See, gray matter of spinal cord consists of the cell bodies and dendrites. White matter consists of axons, myelinated and unmyelinated axons. So in the dorsal horn, there are mainly 4 nuclei present throughout the spinal cord. That is the postromarginal nucleus, which is this one, postromarginal nucleus, and this is the substantia gelatinosa of Rolando. This is the nucleus propriosus, and this is the dorsal nucleus. Okay, those are present in the dorsal horn. We'll be studying them in detail soon. See, guys, this is the representation: anterior, posterior. This is the anterior median fissure. This is the posterior median sulcus. Okay, this one, posterior median sulcus. So that was the dorsal horn, which has 4 nuclei. Now let's go to the lateral horn. What is present in the lateral horn? Lateral horn, it is very interesting because it hosts the autonomic nuclei. So does the whole spinal cord has the autonomic nuclei? Not exactly, because autonomic nervous system has 2 components, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Sympathetic is called as the thoracolumbar outflow, and the parasympathetic is called as the sacral outflow. Cervicosacral also some people call it, but cervical segment is more related to the upper end than the lower end. See here. So from T1 to L2, the thoracolumbar outflow is hosting the preganglionic sympathetic nuclei, and from S2 to S4 it is hosting the preganglionic parasympathetic nuclei. They call it the nervi and erigenitis, pelvic splanchnic nerves, which are the parasympathetic outflow. We'll study that in detail too. That was the lateral horn. Now what is the ventral horn? We just discussed that was the nuclei of the motor nerves, isn't it? Motor neurons. So they are supplying the muscles. So the signals come from behind and go from front. Signals come from behind and the motor signals go from front. That is what is happening in spinal cord basically. Now let's, in grey matter there is something interesting too. There is a concept of laminae. Lamina is like a sheet. We just discussed now, like spinal cord is like a sushi. So if you cut it, you can see layers in it, right? So something similar is happening here. Why is it called divided based on the laminae? Because we just discussed now, the same nerve doesn't supply the brain. It comes, gives a signal to other nerve. Similarly, where there are many neuronal interactions happening in the spinal cord. So for the ease of understanding and even for the clinical significance and for the purpose of research, they divided into the laminae. So lamina 1 is related to the postromarginal nucleus. Lamina 2 is related to the substantia gelatinosa of Rolando. You can see here now. Lamina 3 and 4 are related to the nucleus propriosus. Lamina 5 is related to the dorsal nucleus itself, but it's quite controversial. Lamina 6 is related to the dorsal nucleus directly. Lamina 7 is related to the lateral column. Why is it called a column? Because if the nuclei are put together, it looks like a column. That's why. So 7 is related to the lateral column. 8 and 9 are related to the ventral column, and the 10 is related to the gray matter around the spinal cord, around the central canal basically. That was the laminae. We'll be discussing them as soon as we go into the ascending and descending tracks. That's very interesting, guys. Now let's get the white matter of the spinal cord. What is the white matter? Basically the myelinated and unmyelinated axons, isn't it? So there are basically ascending and descending tracks. See, ascending tracts and descending tracts. So they are arranged. Okay guys, now let's study about the white matter of the spinal cord. What is the white matter? White matter is basically the ascending and descending tracts of spinal cord. They consist of the myelinated and unmyelinated axons of the neurons basically. We'll be studying them in detail now. We'll be introducing it now and we'll be studying them as we go on studying the ascending and descending tracts. That's a very interesting concept. It has many interesting clinical applications. We'll be studying that soon, guys. Okay. Now there is the this is the posterior median sulcus, isn't it? Posterior median sulcus, isn't it? And this is the anterior median fissure, isn't it? So the white matter is divided based on taking the reference point. Which are the reference point? See, between the posterior median sulcus and the posterior horn, there is a posterior fasciculus, and between the posterior horn and the lateral horn, there is the lateral fasciculus, and between the anterior horn and the anterior median fissure, there is the anterior fasciculus. So got it now? Posterior median sulcus, posterior horn, the posterior fasciculus, and the lateral fasciculus, then the anterior fasciculus, anterior funiculus basically. Fasciculus is basically a bundle of nerve fibers. Funiculus is specific to these tracts. Anterior funiculus, lateral funiculus, and the posterior funiculus. And there is two interesting nerve tracts here too. See, the nerves were going like this up. See, the into marks is just like I'm sitting down and I'm hitting a arrow like this. So arrow end is marked as X. So these nerves are going like this, but we are behaving like an unit now. It's not like my right half of the body is behaving independently, left half is behaving independently. So there is something which is connecting both the sides, that is the anterior white commissure. Anterior white commissure, basically just in front of the gray commissure. We call this as the gray commissure because it connects the two sides of the gray matter. So anterior to the anterior gray commissure, there is the anterior white commissure. Anterior white commissure is basically nerve fibers connecting both the sides. Similarly, there is posterior white commissure. According to some references, they say it is in the gray matter itself. The nerve fibers are going from one side to another to the commissures. Why are we studying this, guys? Basically, when you get into the tracts, you should have an idea of the laminae and the nerve fibers, where they end, what happens in the dorsal root ganglion, how is the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid. We'll be studying all of them in detail. Okay. If you have any doubts, please post it in the comment section, guys. I'll be happy to answer you. Okay, guys, take care. Bye.